Hello everyone, and you're very welcome to today's session for the Digital T-Levels and preparing you for your first time delivering this qualification. So the plan for today is just to begin with some quick introductions, and then we'll have an overview of the T-Levels as a whole before we actually get into the content and the assessments specific for the Digital T-Level. We'll discuss options for how to structure your delivery, as well as ongoing formative assessment, an overview of the industry placement, and finally, we'll go through the resources and support available to you, and as well as that to address any final questions that you may have. So please do, throughout this entire session, put any questions you have into the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. This session is also being recorded, and the slides being used today, you can actually access them as well from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. But first though, I would like to begin with a poll just to gauge what is your current confidence with the Digital T-Level. So is it 1 being little to no confidence, or a 10 feeling extremely confident? So where would you put yourself at the minute? So you should see that poll on screen. So the assessment content, the specification, the structuring that your delivery of the content, and so on. Okay, I think we just have all the votes in now. So I'll close off that poll. So it looks like majority of the people, no one's very low on this, which is quite good. So most people in the middling area, or a few people, a quarter of the people here in the 7 to 8 bracket range. Okay. So hopefully whatever questions or uncertainties you might still have, or anything really you want to know about the T-Level, hopefully it will come to light and you'll have a better understanding today. So first, I do want to do just some quick introductions. And I am David Kiernan, and I work in the provider development team at NCFE. My job and our team's remit is to support providers with the delivery of our qualifications, the structure, preparing for the assessments, and anything related to teaching and learning, really. My direct email address is shown on screen, but if I'm unavailable, then we have our general provider development email address. I'm also joined today by one of our subject specialists, David Seddon, who I'll let introduce himself.
Hi everybody, welcome to the session. Just a little bit about me and my background. I've been with NCFE now for around about 12 months working as a subject specialist for digital. And as subject specialist, that means working on new qualifications that we're looking at, working on the content and supporting colleagues and supporting colleges with digital programs. Prior to this, I worked for over 20 years in a large FE college where I've delivered and managed computer science programs, and that's both in FE and in HE, as well as working with advanced higher and degree apprenticeships. I've been involved with T-Levels since they first started development, so going back around about just over 4, getting on to 5 years ago. And the college I worked at was one of the first colleges to then pilot these qualifications. And for me, I think that, you know, these high technical qualifications, they're essential, especially for the digital sector. You know, they're going to help to build that next generation of competent technical professionals. You know, it'll help them meet them industry needs and fills that skills shortages that we're currently seeing in our profession. Thanks, David.
Thank you so much for that, David, and glad to have you here as well. So as mentioned, any questions you do have, please do pop them in. If I'm not sure the answer, then we'll be able to check with our subject specialist as well. And any questions that we can't answer today, we will, of course, go and find the answers and get back to everyone. First thing, though, is just to begin with a high-level overview of the T-Levels, just before we get into the specifics for the digital. So as many of you may already be aware, a T-Level is a level 3 2-year program, which has been aimed at 16 to 19-year-olds. And they've been designed around 11 occupational routes, and they're equivalent in size, depth, and rigor to 3 A-levels. They also have UCAS points as well. T-levels are owned by IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, and the design and content for the T-levels have all come from employer panels who are experts in relevant industries. And because of these employer panels, T-levels do offer students a route to paid employment. And as well as that, with UCAS points being available, students can progress onto higher education or even onto a higher level apprenticeships. So that's the entire design of the T-level, is to ensure that students have that threshold competency relevant for that occupational role. Now these bold bullet points here, they are the 11 occupational routes that T-levels have that I just mentioned, or at least ones that will be developed. And these routes were identified by the Sainsbury's report. Now the sub-bullet points, they're called the pathways. So these are the T-levels available from NCFE. And as you can see, NCFE offers 2 of the pathways for the digital route. So there's 3 pathways in total for the digital route. We offer 2 of them, which is the digital business services and the digital support services. There are further ones just being developed recently for the hair and beauty and creative and design route too. They will be coming out later. But we are just responsible in terms of digital, that's our focus, digital business services and digital support services. Now this is a summary of the general structure of a T-level program. As for NCFE, as for the awarding organization, our responsibility is for the technical qualifications and the assessments. So that is composed of 2 components. We have the core content for the T-level pathway, and we also have then the occupational specialism content for the T-level pathway. So NCFE responsible for the teaching specification you use for your delivery and those assessments. But there are often other requirements to obtain a full T-level. One of those is an industry placement, which has to be a minimum of 315 hours. And some qualifications, some other T-levels, have other requirements, such as maybe a license to practice qualification, being registered with a professional body, etc. Our digital T-levels don't have any of these requirements currently. Previously as well, some of you may have heard about the exit requirement, where students are required to have a level 2 or GCSE grade 4 in English and maths. That has been changed, and so that exit requirement is no longer there. But students will be developing their English and math skills, as it is one of the things that is embedded within the T-level program. The general competencies framework. So this is part of all T-levels, all the technical qualifications. And this lists the English and maths and digital skills competencies that students are also going to be taught. So again, the focus is for students to have threshold competency for that job role. And these competencies, they are assessed as well. They are also embedded within the specification, within the skills content. But you may find it useful to find opportunities to develop these even further with your students. As I said, that was just an overview as T-levels as a whole. Let's now look at some of the specific content for the digital T-level and how the assessments are actually going to work. First though, which digital T-level pathway is it that you're delivering? So are you delivering just digital business services? Are you delivering digital support services? Are you delivering both? If so, do tick both. And also, I would like to know, are you delivering the T-level in digital production design and development as well? Just because there are some differences between the specification layout and the employer set project assessment. So just curious if you are also delivering that. So you should have that little poll on your screen now. So if you tick all, that's relevant for you. So I got about 57% of the votes in. 71% people now. 86, good. Certainly seems digital support services, certainly more popular. Okay, we've got all votes in. Right, so I'll show you how this is broken down. I have often been asked which pathway are most people delivering. Certainly looking at this, it is digital support services. We've got most people on here doing that. Few people doing both, and nearly half are delivering the digital production as well. All right, excellent, thank you. That is useful to know, because some of you may be already delivering like the digital production, design and development. You might be comparing that. So if that's the case, I will be able to speak in those terms if needs be as well. Right, then I'll just close off that poll again. So excellent, thank you very much for that. So first thing is first, let's see where you're going to find actually the relevant information and resources for the T levels that you're delivering. Most of you probably have already been on QualHub, and that's going to be your primary source for information. So you can search for the qualification code, subject area, or I've just typed in T-level digital, and up comes the list of suggestions. The other way to do this is if you click on qualifications, this will bring you to our full qualification page. When you're on here, what you can simply do is filter in our feature section for any of those T-level qualifications. Once you're on the pages, I'm giving an example here with digital support services. One of the most important documents always to access is the specification. You'll also find in there sample assessment papers, you'll find teaching resources and materials as well. And this page will continually get updated as more resources and materials become available, such as the summer exam papers and employer set projects that students have just sat as well. They will be going on there in August on results day. And just before we get into the teaching content, which is next, just one other section, because we often get inquiries about this, is the additional information section. So in the additional information section of the specification, you will find resource requirements. In this section of the specification, you have a list of the resources that you would naturally need to deliver the digital T-level. So if you haven't done so already, it might be useful to cross-reference this list with your own resources. And it does include occupational specialism resources on there too. So if you are considering when it comes to that time for year 2, it'll also be on there as well in that same section. So let's now actually get into the content. So the teaching content consists of both knowledge content and skills content. And the majority of providers focused on what's referred to as the core content in year 1. There are 12 core knowledge units, which you can see on there, with an additional 3 units for those doing digital support services. So every single one of those 1 to 12, business context, culture, data, digital analysis, etc., all of that content word for word identical on digital business services and digital support services. This is because it is some of the root core elements. So it is, if something is a root element, root knowledge, then that means it is common to all the T levels, all of the T levels in the digital route. If there's pathway content, then that content is specific to that pathway. With the case for digital support services, there's 3 units: careers in the digital support services sector, communication within that sector, and fault analysis and problem solving. Then we also have the core skills. And these are the skills that students should be able to demonstrate. Now, the core skills do differ depending on which pathway you're doing. So the skills for digital business services will be different from the digital support services skills. And again, for those of you doing digital production, design and development, the skills for that section will be different as well. Now, this core content does help us to lay the foundation that the occupational specialism content is built upon. And that has been the focus of year 2 for the majority of providers. These are the occupational specialisms that are available. So digital infrastructure, network cabling, and digital support, they're all available to those doing the digital support services pathway. They are the options that could be done in year 2. The other occupational specialism is data technician, and that is available for digital business services. So this, for those of you who are delivering the digital production design and development, this might be a little bit different to you, as I know that that pathway only has got 1 occupational specialism, whereas digital support services is actually 3 you could specialize in. And then each occupational specialism, when you get into year 2, has got performance outcomes, each of which indicates the knowledge and skills required to enable students to achieve that threshold competency in the chosen occupational specialism. So the 3 specialisms from digital support services all have 3 performance outcomes, as you can see there, while the data technician specialism, that has got 6 performance outcomes. In the specification, there is additional teaching content around each of these performance outcomes. And just like the core, it is divided into knowledge content and skills content. So that's an overview of the teaching specification. And just like that specification is divided into core content and occupational specialism content, so are the actual assessments. So we begin first with looking at the core assessment. Now this component is made up of 2 subcomponents. We have 2 exam papers designed to assess the student's core knowledge, and we have an externally set skills assessment called the employer set project. Now it's called this because the tasks have been developed in conjunction with employers, just to make them as occupationally realistic as possible. Some confusion has occurred, thinking it has something to do with the industry placement. It doesn't. Just purely called employer set project because employers had input on those tasks. The core assessments will be available in the summer and autumn terms. So the employer set project is generally in May in the summer and in November in the autumn. And the exam papers, usually June in the summer and December for the autumn. Now, one important thing to note here is that when students sit the core assessments for the first time, they need to sit both subcomponents in the assessment series. So for example, the employer set project and the exam papers in the summer of year 1. So if it's their very first attempt at sitting the core assessments, it's not possible to just sit the exam papers only in the summer and then the employer set project in the autumn, for example. That wouldn't be possible. For the very first sitting, both of those components need to be taken together. And this is because all of the core content has to be delivered before they can sit the assessments. So that's why it has to be set up that both assessments are taken. That way we're assessing all of the core content together for the very first time. Now the assessments themselves, the core assessments, they are graded A star to E, and there is also a U grade or ungraded. And students can resit the core assessments as well. I will come on to that later regarding the retakes and resit rules. So let's begin with the subcomponent, which is usually the easiest to talk about, even though it comes second, the exam papers. So the exam papers are designed to assess the knowledge content. Paper A is assessing the 6 elements shown on screen: business context, culture, digital environments, diversity, inclusion, learning, and planning. Whereas paper B addresses the remaining 12 elements. So we have data, digital analysis, legislation, security, testing, and tools. Now, for those of you who are delivering the digital support services pathway, so most of you here, paper B will also have an additional section in the exam paper to assess the 3 pathway elements. So there's a slight difference there. If you're doing digital support services, your paper B is a bit longer because it has an extra section in it to account for that pathway content. The exams themselves can be taken as traditional paper-based assessments, or there's actually an on-screen option available too. So do consider what is going to be best for your students, and you will actually find sample papers on QualHub, including an example of what an on-screen assessment would look like for the students. So you can give it a little trial run. Both digital paper A's, so the business services paper A and the support services paper A, they are both 2 hours long. But for paper B, digital business services is 2 hours, but digital support services, because of our pathway content, is longer, is 2.5 hours in length. The exam papers will consist of a mix of different question types. So it'll be multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and some of the extended response questions. And in most of the extended response questions, they also get marked on their quality of written communication. So use of grammar and so on. Now the exam papers are designed to assess 3 key assessment objectives. Assessment objective 1, or AO1, which is about recalling knowledge and demonstrating that. So the recall and demonstration of knowledge. AO2, assessment objective 2, applying knowledge to different scenarios, situations, contexts, etc. And then we have the highest demand assessment objective, AO3, which is being able to analyze and evaluate. Some exam questions might actually be brand new scenarios or situations that you've not actually explicitly taught to your students. But that's okay, that's part of the assessment as well. Students will still have the required knowledge in order to apply it to that situation. But that is a high demand area. That's where AO3 comes in, being able to really analyze and evaluate and apply that knowledge to new situations and scenarios. So that's the exam papers, the first subcomponent. Our next subcomponent is the employer step project. We're going to begin with the digital business services employer step project. So this project does occur within a 2-week window. We'll tell you when that is. And it does begin in May, as I mentioned, for the summer series, and in November for the autumn. So this particular employer step project for digital business services actually comes with some pre-release material. And this would be given to your students 3 weeks before the assessment window actually opens. And this is to give students a chance to familiarize themselves with the sector focus of the brief and any other relevant information. So maybe it's about researching e-commerce and the economy as an example. This research would also have to be checked by tutors just to ensure it meets the requirements, such as being just 4 pages of research, that the font they use, Arial, font 12, things like that. Then we get into the actual tasks for the employer step project. And the type of task, the nature of the task is always the same. So task 1 is about using the information in the brief to take project considerations and potential risks. So making those considerations and considering those risks, the production of a flow chart or even a Gantt chart, etc. So that one is about considering the structure that you're going to apply and what considerations, requirements the project has. Task 2A is about what steps might be taken next. So as an example, it might be about explaining the type of data you would require to meet the needs of the brief, where you would source that data, what you would do with it, and why you think those actions would be beneficial. Task 2B is all about handling the data. So it could be cleansing it, analyzing it, transforming the data into a meaningful output, etc. And other supporting documents may be asked for too, such as an entity relationship diagram. Now you can see on screen there that for data handling, that task, it is on a fixed date and time. The other tasks can be scheduled within the assessment window we give you. Again, key date schedule, which will be released, I believe, 1st of July is when we're hoping to have the finalized version of that out, would tell you those dates. But for data handling, that is on a fixed date and time. It's one to be ensure that your students are around for. Then we have task 3. This one is about communicating ideas to different audiences, so technical and non-technical. And this is achieved via the production of a presentation. And then we finally have task 4, which is the reflective evaluation. This is where students consider the project, how well it went, and how well it meets the needs of the brief, etc., things along those lines. So you have a 2-week window, supervised sessions, with some of the tasks being on fixed date and time. And like I said, those are the types of tasks that will always be asked for. With digital support services employer-set project, there's actually 2. So those doing the digital production design and development, this might be new to you. There's actually 2 employer-set projects that students could sit for this one. There is a digital support employer-set project, and there's also a network cabling and digital infrastructure employer-set project. Now, the types of tasks are very similar for both employer-set projects, as they are both assessing the same core skills, core knowledge, that's all the core content. But there might be some different evidence requirements between the employer-set projects. Now, neither employer-set project for digital support services, there is no pre-release material for students, but providers, you will get the information earlier. And this is to allow you to do any necessary system configurations, such as the system configurations that might be needed for our first task, task 1, which is a fault finding and troubleshooting task. So providers would use that information that we supply in order to configure your systems to replicate the fault. And the evidence for this can include aspects like a troubleshooting document, test plan document, and possibly some other documents. For example, for the network cabling and digital infrastructure employer-set project, it might also contain aspects like maybe a firewall configuration document. Task 2 is about gathering information in order to make recommendations or offer solutions to the issue that's actually being described in the brief. This is kind of broken down into 3 bits. Students have a chance to research and prepare questions for an interview. Then there's actually a 10-minute interview with a member of staff. You will be given information to help you with this, such as the system requirements that you have in place, how many computers, staff, and so on, so that you can answer the students' questions. And then there is a summary. They write an email following the interview, just with a summary of questions, responses, issues identified, etc. And then finally, we do have task 4. This is also sort of an evaluation, a self-reflection task, where students produce a satisfaction survey and a post-project review document. We will have specific training regarding the exams and the employer-set projects later on in the year, so that's just an overview of those for now. Now, when it comes to the weighting breakdown, that is shown on your screen there between the 2 subcomponents. I did say students are allowed to resit. That is absolutely true, and it is their best grade as well that will carry forward. With retakes, students can either sit the employer-set project only, the exam papers only, or resit both. So that requirement I mentioned earlier to sit the employer-set project and exam papers together, remember that's only for their first attempt, for their first sitting. If they're doing retakes, it is possible just to do a skills assessment with the employer-set project, or just to resit the exam papers. One thing to note though, if they do need to resit the papers, then it would include both papers. So it's not possible just to resit one, because that knowledge content is split over the 2 papers. So students would need to resit both. Results then from both the exam and the employer-set project, that will be aggregated to give an overall core grade. And that is A star to E, and you, as I mentioned earlier. That is, as I mentioned, that is what most providers have been doing in year one. They've been focusing on core content delivery and have opted to enter students for the assessment in the summer of year one. The next assessment component, many of you may not be worried about this now, but we'll just go through it, is the occupational specialism, or OS as it's sometimes referred to as. So the occupational specialism is assessed through a series of synoptic assignments. Or in the case of the data technician with digital business services, it is just one assignment with several tasks. And there are specific conditions, just like with the employer step project, that task must be undertaken. So either supervised conditions, there might be fixed date and time, etc. Now, where the core assessments, they were graded A star to E. These assignments are actually graded distinction to pass, and ungraded, of course, as well. Pass, merit, distinction, ungraded. And the retake rules for the synoptic assignments, it's actually the same as those for the core assessments. So there is an unlimited number of retakes. That might be difficult to do, of course, to schedule within your 2-year delivery. And any retakes must be completed within 2 years after completing the T level. And that applies for the core assessments as well. I'm sure many of you don't want students coming back after year 13. Hopefully they'll have a successful year in year 13 to have everything, but it is possible 2 years after completing to do any other retakes. If it comes to retaking the occupational specialism assignments, if there are multiple assignments, then it's not possible just to choose a single assignment to retake. They would have to retake each assignment. I will go into just an overview of what the content is on these assignments. But again, I just want to hand back over to you. I'm curious, which occupational specialism are you delivering? Some of you may not know yet, but just take all that apply. And again, if you are delivering more than one occupational specialism, please do tick that box as well. I'll just show you those results there. So it looks like digital support services, the digital support, occupational specialism, and the digital infrastructure. Well, I know someone's doing the digital business services, I think, so at least one person here would be doing the data technician. Okay. Excellent. So let's have a look at what these assignments are like. Now, these assignments do begin usually around April each year when they're released. And again, they are externally set and marked by NCFE, just like our employer step project. For the data technician, occupational specialism, so the digital business services option, there is a single assignment which has been broken up into 4 separate tasks. So the first task is about researching and writing a proposal based on the brief. So for example, it might be regarding the smart home device market, as our sample one does, maybe considering the demographics of smart home device users, how the devices are used, the forecast for these devices, etc. Students will also have to analyze data sets provided by NCFE and consider their appropriateness, and also if there's any impact of certain laws or policies or regulations in relation to any of that data. Let's say GDPR or the Data Protection Act, does any of that have an effect? In task 2, students will be given further data and they will need to process it, cleanse, validate, etc., and perform some analysis. Students will also need to be able to merge data sets together and log their progress and decision making throughout. Task 3, students will identify trends and patterns in the data using statistical tests and keep a log containing decisions about selected data to represent insights on how it relates to the client's briefs, things like that. And then we have task 4. For task 4, students are to create a presentation drawing conclusions and showcasing their results. So students will also explain and justify any key insights they've identified, any trends or interesting patterns that appeared, etc. So next up, for the digital support services, we have got 3 assignments. And the one thing to note is that, remember, for the digital support services, we do have 3 different occupational specialisms, but each specialism does contain 3 assignments. So if we look at our digital infrastructure, we have assignment 1 is about planning and designing. So such as maybe a new building needing required hardware that's going to help provide a robust network. So evidence, again, for this could include aspects like a project plan, flow or Gantt charts, and it also consider any legal or regulatory requirements, creating diagrams and technical proposals, aspects like that. Assignment 2 for digital infrastructure, that's about developing a test system for the reason given in the brief. So just testing the compatibility of a planned backend server update with the existing backend systems. And this will also include like practical tasks, maybe cable creation and the installation and configuration for the new test system that you're going to put in to simulate the network. And then assignment 3, it's about risk assessment and mitigating these risks. So the task can include aspects like a risk assessment document, security policy document, business continuity or recurrent documents, etc. Then digital support occupational specialism. So the first assignment is about the preparation involved in configuring a network and then installing and configuring that network. Assignment 2 is about dealing with job requests, including prioritizing, that's a key thing, prioritizing those jobs and justifying the choices taken and take appropriate action. And students might also need to create other documents, maybe like instructional documents for users, giving them instructions on, let's say, how to carry out a display screen equipment workstation assessment. And then we also have our final assignment then for digital support. It's about monitoring, maintenance, and demonstrating continuous improvement of a network, such as the creation of an infrastructure status log and deploying an image remotely. Then deploying the image remotely, that can be evidenced with like annotated screenshots or photographs. Photographs, obviously, it depends on whether you're working on a virtual machine or on a physical machine, and any documented notes showing the creation and deployment of the image. And our final occupational specialism is the network cabling. So assignment 1 is about designing a new network and a network diagram that meets the requirements of the brief. So this can include like the production of a network design specification, might be a diagram of the physical layout of the proposed installation of the network, a logical network diagram, screenshots of that, a description of how all the components would end up working together, etc. So really thinking about designing that network and creating that network. Assignment 2 is about installing and testing the cable system. So students might have to create working cables and install hardware to a standard that will ensure a good, safe working environment. Coming up with a test plan, testing the cabling, maybe to do with data transmission capability, etc. And our last assignment then is about risk assessment and troubleshooting, such as testing the cables to fix faults, describe how to approach troubleshooting for a proposed installation, carrying out a risk assessment of network, and so on. And we do have sample assignment briefs for these on QualHub. And there's also exemplification materials. So these exemplification materials show sample work for these assignments at a distinction standard and a pass standard. When all the assessment components have been completed, then a grading matrix is used to determine their final grade. And you will find this within the specification. The overall weighting between the core component and the occupational specialism is a 50-50 split. Now let's say a student did get a B grade in the core assessment, and then they got a merit for the occupational specialism. So the student's final grade then would be a merit. So final grades for the T levels are distinction star, distinction merit pass. But for the individual components, the core is given as A star to E, and occupational specialism grades are given as pass merit distinction. Final T-level grade is also pass merit distinction star. And completed their T-level program fully, they will receive a T-level certificate, which will be issued by iFate. The T-level certificates, they'll actually outline as well all of the components they've achieved and the grade they've achieved on each part of the technical qualification. Now, if students have not successfully completed all of the components, and I do mean all the components, including like industry placement, then they will receive a T-level statement of achievement. And this will outline what the student has achieved. Now, UCAS points are also available for T-levels. And these, again, will only be allocated to the overall T-level grades. So students still need to achieve a full T-level qualification, so industry placement and so on, as I mentioned. They need to achieve that full T-level qualification in order for UCAS points to apply. And students also must achieve a minimum of an overall pass grade in order to receive UCAS points. So that is an overview of the T-level and of the digital content and so on. And the next section that we're going to have a look at is regarding the planning your delivering, structuring it out, and so on. And we will have a few different activities and so on within here as well. So the first thing when it comes to actually planning your delivery and thinking about how it could be delivered, how the content that you're going to be teaching could be organized, the first thing it's very useful to know is to know how much time you're actually going to need for this. Now, the specification does give guided learning hours, which can be used, as the name suggests, for guidance for how long it would take to teach the content. So we have our core guided learning hours there. You will see that the digital support services is longer. The reason the core is longer, remember, it's got those 3 additional pathway contents. And do note that the occupational specialism, that can have different guided learning hours as well. And don't forget, you will have to have your 315 hours for industry placement as well. And that can be spread over your 2 years of delivery. It could be done in block placement and so on, but we'll discuss aspects of that later. So what I'm going to show you is just an example. I want to emphasize that word example, 2-year delivery plan. Because there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to ensure that whatever you do, your plan and so on, it's the most suitable for yourselves, for your students, staff, etc. So one of the first things possibly is that you're going to be doing, and it's very useful as well, is having a comprehensive initial assessment and induction stage. That can often be vital to help you understand what students you have on there, strengths, weaknesses, how well they may cope with the rigors of the T-level, etc. So we do need to ensure that students have all the skills you deem necessary to actually start the T-level. And we all know that GCSE grades don't always assure skills and knowledge. Students' retention of GCSE knowledge doesn't always follow through when they begin year 12. So do plan any induction activities in a way that assesses your students' starting points and potential. We'll mention a few ideas regarding that in a bit as well. So the assessment and induction period, that will help to inform which students you actually register onto the T-level. Now, registration of students onto T-level would have to be done by the 1st of November, so between the 1st of September to the 1st of November. So do try and make sure that by that point, you know which students you are continuing with, or which ones have got the requirements and so on, so you can register those students onto the course. Because if it is possible, you may be delivering other qualifications or digital qualifications. During that time, you may end up switching students. moving some from T level to your other provision, or moving ones from the other provision onto T level. So you may have a bit of flexibility there during that time as well when you're assessing students to determine which course would be best for them. And then you may want to also start delivery of the core content. As I mentioned, that's a common approach providers have taken, focusing on the core content for year one. And also most providers have gone for the first opportunity to set the core assessments, which will be in the summer term of year one. And then the results released on results day in August, which for this year I believe is the 18th, but I don't know what it will be for 2023. Then once the core content is finished, in year one, you might actually have some spare time, maybe at the end. If not, don't worry about it. You may have some at the end of the year to deliver some of the occupational specialism content. Then when we get into year two, you may actually just be starting the occupational specialism content, or you might end up continuing it if you did manage to begin at the end of year one. Another aspect to plan for is any students that may end up doing resits in year two. So there is the autumn opportunity for that. So employers have project in November, exams in December, and then with the results released in March. Then we have the final assessment for students, the synoptic assignments. And these assignments begin around April time. So do make sure you're aware of when different assignments and so on are actually taking place, what those key dates are, so you can plan your delivery accordingly. And again, for the core assessments, there is another opportunity to resit if needs be in the summer. And then we get the final results in August. So that actually completes the technical qualification requirements. But do remember, students also need to complete that industry placement, 315 hours. And how you schedule this, again, it's up to you. You could schedule like weekly days if you wanted over your entire 2 years delivery. So single or half day weeks, or in a single block of 45 days, or some sort of combination. That's entirely up to you. So just leading on from this then, we're going to get into an activity soon for you all to take part in. I just want to know, before we get into that activity and considering the planning your delivery, what are your current plans regarding different aspects for entry and so on? So what are those current plans for entry requirements? What are your current plans for aspects like initial assessments or any induction activities that you've planned or things like that? So you can either scan the QR code with your smart device, go to slido.com and enter that code there, or I've just put into the chat on the GoToWebinar control panel a link just directly to that word cloud. So just please add your suggestions on there. So what is it you're thinking? Have you got actually entry requirements set up? What are you asking for? Is there particular assessments that you think you're going to use on your students? Any activities to get them used to and understanding the rigor of the T levels and what's involved, etc. So I'll just give a couple of minutes on this. Like I said, scan the QR code, click on the link I put into the chat, or if you go to slido.com, you'll be able to enter that in there. Okay, everyone, I can see we've got a few different things in here in terms of your current plans. Just looking at the grades, it looks like common one, 4 GCSEs, grade 4, 4 and above, and so on. So on entry requirements, maths and English at grade 6 though, right? After computer or business background, some people are. Testing Excel ability, in terms of Microsoft Excel and spreadsheets, I'm assuming, okay? Not sure, just looking today and listening to this session, by all means, please do. And put any questions you have, anything that you're not sure about, please into that question box. Okay. 5 GCSEs including maths and English. So it's like commonly, most people going with 4 GCSEs, most including English and maths. And something's changed on here, and I'm not sure what. Some others also, as well as I'm assuming this is for your entry requirements, also looking for a computing and business background as well, seeing if there's any qualifications that was done at that stage. Okay, excellent. I'm just going to close this off and have a look at the next little bit, which is about that initial advice and guidance. And we're going to have a look at this and what you may find useful. And this has come from, you may find this section useful as it's come from our providers and what their experience have of delivering the T-levels. And the first aspect is definitely around entry requirements that you may want to set for your students. As it is down to individual providers to set them, there's no formal entry requirements and so on that have been set by us, DFE or IFATE. And most providers that we could see on there, English and Maths at grade 4 or above. And one person did put in that's either a business or computing background. That is something providers have said as well. We would like, but not essential sort of requirement. Next piece of advice is around finding out actually the students' prior learning and exam grades for those bits. So finding out what learning has already taken place. And like I said, this can actually include technical knowledge, maths, English, science, digital, work experience, all those sort of things. Can help build up a picture of the students' capabilities. And as well as having really honest conversations with your potential students can be vital. So you need to ensure that they're ready to begin this course. And it's not just about being successful in the assessments. You may get students who fly through exams and so on are fine, but this is also about having the necessary skills, behaviors, attitude, and confidence, or at least showing the ability to develop these to successfully complete the T-level as well. So for example, if we're thinking about the industry placement, students need to be aware that they'll have to have good timekeeping, personal presentation and professionalism, being accountable, etc. And if some students who maybe aren't ready for the T-level program, then they might be better served by the T-level transition program. Might be more useful, just to give them that year to get ready before they actually begin the full T-level. Now, so you'll need to ensure that students' skills are at the sufficient level to start the T-level and sort of hit the ground running, shall we say, in September. And providers that have done other T-levels, and what we're hearing from them, found that the higher they set entry levels for these areas, the better students have managed the work and expectations of T-levels. And this leads into beginning the year with those high expectations of your T-level students. So having those high expectations is a useful start to the program. And with this, and if you set this straight away with your students, then they'll understand that rigor as well. So it will help to prepare them, and you may actually find it useful, even if you start the program with this approach, with having those high expectations. It almost comes like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. So treat the T-levels as the academic challenge that they can be from the start, and so students are prepared for that. And this will help to reinforce to your students what's going to be expected on them on this new and prestigious program. An approach that has benefited many providers from the start. Then, of course, we have the industry placement. So ensure that any potential students are provided and have a positive take on the importance of these placements, and are clear about the challenges that placements might bring about for them as well, and how important they're actually going to be for success on the program. And students are allowed a maximum of 2 different employers over the 2 years, if needs be. So you may benefit from seeking out larger employers where possible. I know it's not always possible, where they might be able to get experience in multiple different areas. Now, you shared a few ideas there. I'm just going to put a few suggestions on here myself regarding some different aspects. So as I mentioned just earlier, it is useful to get a sense of the student's background. So when they join your college, your school, when they join that course, knowing what they've done can be very useful. So you may want to find out if any of your students have got experience of any computing or business type qualifications. So in this way, you might be able to see if there's a common pool of knowledge among your students, and perhaps carry out some initial assessments on that common pool to see how much information have they actually retained from, let's say, GCSE, if it happens to be a GCSE. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be lots of extra work for yourselves delivering this course for the teachers, for the lecturers, as you can usually go onto any awarding organization's websites in many cases and actually access their past papers. So you won't have to write any little quizzes for them. You can usually just grab questions from the awarding body's website. And just put an example on there for ourselves, because NCFE does deliver a level 1/2 technical award in business and enterprise. And if you did go to that quali page, you can freely access our past papers and mark schemes. Another thing, and I guess that someone put Excel, I think, as a suggestion on there, you may want to do a skills assessment with your students as well. Look, just seeing how skilled they are maybe at using some of the different functions and capabilities that's present on Excel or any spreadsheet programs, being able to do that. And even in terms of their research skills, so how good are students at finding reliable information from reliable sources? Are they able to identify reliable sources of information? And even producing presentations as part of that aspect, even if it's if you're doing the first unit on business context, presentation could be regarding the difference between, let's say, public and private, something along those lines, and that'll help to start to build up their presentation skills, and you can actually get a sense of what level they're currently at. And just actually on that, if you do presentations, then actually you might find the employer set project mark schemes useful, especially the indicative content on the mark scheme for digital business services, where there is that presentation task, because that could be used to make like a checklist or a tick list or a set of requirements that their presentation should contain. This way, you'll actually start developing some of those skills to prepare students for their assessments early on. Now, I'm going to come on to actually the next part, which is about deciding on the content delivery. Now, so when it comes to structuring your delivery, deciding like what content to teach, what order should be taught in, etc., there are many different approaches you could actually take here. So you might just decide to deliver the content just as it's laid out in the specification, deliver it element at a time, for example. It's absolutely fine. However, what you may want to do is maybe mix up the content. For example, let's say you've got a member of staff who is fantastic at anything to do with legislation. Maybe they've got a background in that. And what you may want to do then is to combine the root core element 8 content, which is all about legislation, with any other large bits of legislation that appears within the content. Just as an example, within element 6 on diversity and inclusion, we have got further information about legislation and so on. So like the Equality Act 2010. So aspects of that you may decide to combine together where it makes sense for you. And if you did decide to deliver in a way like this, and I'm just going to use an example here, imagining I've got 3 teachers delivering on my digital T-level, then if you are doing that, then you may be dividing up the content differently among the teachers, depending on what areas, what specific subject knowledge and skills they have. So here, for example, teacher 1, they're really good clearly at the data stuff, so they've been given some of the data work to do. Teacher 2, they're good at knowing about the business types and so on and legislation. And teacher 3, teacher 3 there, testing and the pathway content. So fault finding and analysis and communication within the digital support services stuff. That's what they're doing. Now, there's one thing I do want to highlight in here because it's so easy to overlook. Don't forget to plan in the delivery of the core skills as well. Don't want to miss any of those core skills. So do make sure you plan that out within your delivery. On the specification, the core skills does give suggestions of content that kind of underpins it. For example, with teacher 2, when they're teaching about business contexts, then core skill 1 regarding communicate information clearly, that could be, let's say, putting a report together for our board of directors. So that'll be a much more technical audience there versus putting some information together for customers. So that would clearly, communication would be quite different in those scenarios. They're little activities or tasks or bits of skills that could be brought into your lessons as well. Another common approach that we've had from providers is to divide the content into themes based around the exam papers. Now, those again who are doing the digital production design and development, or digital, the digital production design and development, you may be more familiar with this, as I believe the specification is laid out sort of in this way: paper A content, paper B content on the digital production design and development T-level specification. We also have got certain elements that match to certain papers. We've just kind of subdivided out to give you flexibility in your delivery. So paper 1, that always has 3 sections covering the root core elements: 1 and 2, 6 and 5, 7 and 8. Then we have paper B, which is different then, depending on whether it's digital business services or digital support services. So digital business services has got 3 sections, which contain elements 3 and 4, 8 and 10, and 11 and 12. Those doing digital support services, there is an extra section in there. It's got 4 sections of that exam paper, with 1 being for the digital support services pathway content. Now, then some providers as well, that's the content, have actually had a separate teacher or separate lessons specific for the core skills or for employer set project preparation. And here's an example plan based on that type of delivery model that I mentioned. Again, I'm using the sample I have here is just assuming I've got 3 teachers delivering on my digital T-level. So teacher 1 will be delivering the content that's going to be on paper A. We have teacher number 2, they're going to be delivering the content that's going to be on paper B. And then we have our 3rd teacher there, who is going to be focusing on the skills. Now, what would be useful, though, if you are going for a model like that, is for that teacher number 3, for them to know what other knowledge content is actually being delivered in the same week they have their lessons. This way, that teacher could contextualize their core skills and make their lessons maybe more relevant to that week's teaching. I'm going to hand over to you now to have a think about this. And please, like I said, do put any questions you have into the question box, because I'm going to be checking them shortly. So about 10 minutes on this, because I now want you just to take a bit of time considering your delivery. Is there any bits of the specification, like I was doing there with the legislation, that you think could combine more nicely together? Maybe help to streamline your delivery, things like that. And even thinking about your staff, the teachers you have there, your colleagues, you know, or even just thinking about yourself. What do you think from the digital T-level bits are your strong areas, bits of information you want to do? Is there any topics that you think you're actually going to begin with? That's the best one to begin with. That'll help get them excited for the course, for example. All those sort of things. Now, what I'd like you to do is to add any of your suggestions and ideas to the Padlet. And I will share that link directly into the chat again. And what I've created is headings for all of the root core elements, so those 12 elements. And also there is a section for core skills and any other comments that you may have or any other suggestions. So when you're on here, as someone already is, if you just add underneath here to put on your comment. Like I said, it might be about where you could combine bits together, like I said, I'm just going back to that example there where I took the bit of diversity and inclusion, put it here into legislation. It could be which topics you're beginning with first and so on. All the 12 elements, or 3 pathway elements for digital business services. Core skills at the end, and any other suggestions. Now, there's no need to obviously do every single one, but I shall leave this on for about 10 minutes. Then we'll come back, have a look at what you've put on there, and we will take a break then after that, just because that'll take us probably to about 10:30ish, I would say. So we can have a bit of a break around then. So as I said, I'll leave that on there for about 10 minutes or so. Please add on any of your comments, suggestions, and so on. Okay, everyone. We'll have a look at some of the suggestions that we've had through on here. I know there's a lot to consider. There's so many different options and so on. So we can see in culture, someone said that this can be split across legislation and business content, a lot of crossover. Good, so some of the culture bits you could bring into your business, the business and legislation, excellent. So that could help, like I said, to streamline your delivery, make it said more relevant for your students, even more holistic and so on. I've taken that sort of approach. A question actually on the data bit. Someone's wanting to start off with data and to run some projects on big data. Yep. And someone's asked for suggestions. How about analyzing UK census data? Very nice, absolutely, yeah. I do like that. And Marvel Universe example. Okay, Table for Students section has a really good Marvel Universe example, which is great for getting students to think about how data works. Interesting. Not anything for some of the other ones here. Learning, combine the learning pathway and the careers pathway. All for the digital support services. Yeah, absolutely. Those bits come in nice together. Learning is talking about development opportunities, CPD, and so on, which would tie in with, I suppose, careers aspects, because when you're in jobs, CPD, continually CPD is so important, isn't it? And just scroll over to, another suggestion. So considering running the T level as if students are working in the digital support organization. So yeah, absolutely. I suppose that'll make them think they're going to work every day. But yeah, absolutely. So little aspects like that could help them. And one of the tasks I mentioned was talking about the prioritization of like job requests and so on that comes in. So that could be a useful one if they're continually thinking about that. If you're running as if it's an organization, prioritizing and justifying those sort of reasons. I'd love to know how that would work actually. When you're delivering that, I'd be very interested. But yeah, those always comes back to the justification of choices for those higher sort of level bits. Right. Right then, I don't think there's any other suggestions that have come in there. So I'll tell you what, we will actually now just take a break. Let's see, it is 20 past 10 roughly now. We'll come back, we'll give you a 15-minute break. So if you come back at 25 to 11, so, or sorry, yes, 25 to 11, 10:30, 25 to 11, around there. I'll probably be back on here and speaking at 10:30, just in case anyone has any questions. I want to make sure, but we will start again at 25 to. So enjoy yourself, make a mug of tea, do whatever you need to, and I'll see you in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed and had a nice restful break. Managed to get yourself sorted for our second part today. So we're going to be starting this section with formative and summative assessment. So with formative and summative assessment, quite a vital thing, especially with the T levels, to make sure that you're monitoring how well students are actually progressing on their T level journey. And one of the other things, once you have your interested students, you've had those interviews and conversations and so on, as I've mentioned, you should really try and plan some form of initial assessment. I'm just going to use the analogy of a mountain here just to represent the learning journey that students will be embarking on. And the first thing you'll want to find out is, where are your students on that journey? Are they at the base of the mountain? Some of them might be part way up. Others might be making their way to the mountain itself. They haven't even reached the base of the mountain. So knowing the student's starting points will help to aid your planning. And when it comes to getting the students up this mountain, it would be fantastic, and we love to picture it as a nice, straight, direct journey. Unfortunately, things aren't always that simple. You can get students beginning out well, making progress, you can see that, but then maybe the excitement of a new course might end up wearing off a little bit, or maybe they just start to plateau, or maybe even they've reached some content just that they're really struggling with and lacking that resilience and so on. Or maybe it's even some outside factor, home life or health, where support might be needed. And in some cases, it could even lead to regression, them falling behind further. But the issues, once the issues have been identified, we can get that appropriate interventions in place, get the students back on track. And some student journeys can be much more complex, more ups and downs, further away from that mountain peak than others. And there's just some different questions that you that could be considered in a scenario like this, like how off track are they, and what can be done to actually get them to the top. Should the students themselves actually be on the T-level program? Is it the most appropriate program for them? And do you have the capacity to meet their learning and support needs as well? And as I mentioned, every student's learning journey, it's going to differ. So there's not like a one size fits all. But this is where we will need to have that really good initial advice and guidance stage and that initial assessment stage, so we can identify these earlier. So which skills, knowledge, and competencies will be needed for DT levels? Well, one of the things to think about is, of course, as I mentioned, placement. How work ready are the students for this? Is there a way you're going to actually assess their work readiness at the start of the course? And as well, do record any findings that the student, so that the student is aware of any developmental needs they have. Set them objectives and goals related to the placements and how they could be developed, just as an example. And of course, students will need to develop and use more like academic reading and writing skills on the T level. And of course, for progression, they will need that too. And again, thinking about how are they going to be assessed or recorded during that inductions phase. Some providers I know have got like a entire school system that automatically, when new students come along, they have set times and so on for students to be assessed on their English and maths. Is that something that's happening with your program as well, or is it something that's planning on developing within it? What about any subject specialist or technical skills that could be assessed actually during that induction? So is there any skills within the content that you think that's quite a high level skill, that's quite detailed, but students will have done little bits of this? Let's see whereabouts they are currently at. So plan activities that can assess these existing skills and even their knowledge and experience. And that takes us on to even wider skills. And for some of those examples, could be about how competent the student is, how likely are they to be, what will they need to actually be competent and successful? Well, what are those considerations? And making sure that reflective practice, as you saw with the two employer set projects, that reflective evaluation, reflective practice is huge in all T levels, not just in the digital sector, in all T levels it comes through. And it might be useful to include an assessment of them during the induction as well. How good are students at actually evaluating their own performance? And even metacognition then, how aware are students of their learning and their development needs? Do they know what works best for them? How are they going to take ownership and play an active role in developing? And then anything else that you might need to know and assess and record on. Now, individualized learning is something Ofsted often look for. So identifying your students' starting points, recording them in some way and using them to shape your curriculum, that will be seen as excellent practice as well. And in terms of T levels as well, making sure students are developing their English, maths, and digital skills competencies, as well as being sort of work ready. You know, they have that focus. It's all they've got those contextualizations. They're well aware of the course while they're doing the work and aspects like that as well. So ongoing assessment, especially formative assessment, is something that's useful to plan into your delivery. Now, for some T levels, this is brand new to teachers because they're used to delivering like internal assessment only qualifications or aspect like that. I don't know if that's the case for anyone here, but that's where formative assessment does come quite important. So what might be useful is for this type of planning is to actually slot it in to your calendar. And even when you're doing this type of planning, you could even start to think about, especially for the first bit, what other qualifications you run that might be have similar academic styles as well, that have terminal assessments. And that way you could use some of those materials if needs be. We have sample materials too, but if there's any other assessment materials from other ones that are suitable for yours, by all means, do use that. The more exposure the students have, the different scenarios, context, situations, and so on, the better. And for so those more accustomed to vocational courses, this formative assessment, as I mentioned, may be brand new to you. So the first part, I've definitely said that a few times, is going to be that initial induction period. Let's get students off to a strong start straight away and determine their current level of knowledge, skills, attributes, and their capabilities and their potential to be successful on the T level. Then other assessment points during the year would be up to you, whenever you think they would be. For example, this might be every half term. You might have a bigger piece of assessment or a bigger piece of formative assessment with littler ones in between there. And you might actually start to increase how much formative assessment activity you're doing as we're coming closer to some of the assessment windows. But regardless of the time frame you choose, if you actually plan them into your delivery specifically on there, then there'll be a focus of your T level delivery rather than an afterthought or a consideration. So it's useful to look at the content now, see if there's any bits where that would be useful, that would be a good formative assessment idea, and so on. We are going to share some different formative assessment ideas and scenarios and things that could be done. But first, I would like to know, what tools do you actually use at the minute for formative assessment? Again, if you scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter that number. So what is it that you currently do? Do you just use past exam paper questions? Is there any scenarios or context you use? What about any digital tools, any online assessment tools or games and stuff that you end up using quite a bit? So I'm going to put the link for this Slido directly into the chat. So if you click on that link, hopefully you'll be able to access and do that Slido. Okay, everyone. Just going to have a look at some of the suggestions that we've had in so far. Please do continue to add more if we have. You can see exam very big. I'm assuming exam is sort of referring to the exam questions and things like that. Because we see questions on there as well. Exam questions, yeah. So other aspects, we have research. Using Flipgrid. Oh, I do like Flipgrid. That is such a fun tool for video-based reflection. Excellent. Depending, actually, just thinking about that for Flipgrid, as long as it doesn't breach any sort of regulations, GDPR and so on. It might even, whether students are out on placement, if they see something in particular in placement where it was like a problem they had to solve or something like that, maybe they could even make their own sort of one. So here's a problem I faced, what would we do? I could see someone's using must have downloaded our materials at the SCORM online materials, good. Open questions, so lots of questioning basically. Padlet for collaborative whiteboard. Yes, very nice. It is. It's quite useful for that. Excellent. So some good suggestions in there. So I'm just got a few on here. No particular method is necessarily right or wrong. It depends on the circumstances, what it is you're trying to assess and find out. Just going to run through a few of these. Not going to read through all of these for you. Just a few, just to highlight them. So obviously, tests and exam style questions, that's an obvious one. So it is very useful to get those. Now, the good thing is, for those doing digital business services, there is a one sample A paper, one sample B paper. For those doing digital support services, there is one sample A paper and one sample B paper. But because you both have the same root content, it is possible to use each other's exam papers. The only bit that wouldn't be applicable for those doing digital business services is the first section of paper B, because the first section of paper B on digital support services is all pathway content. So if you're doing business services, ignore section A of the support services paper B, because that only contains that pathway content. Good. Also, different range of discussion-based activities is quite useful for peer support, peer learning, and also embedding those sort of employability skills as well, being able to discuss things. Presentations, that has been mentioned as well before, quite good, especially as lots of the technical qualifications do contain some aspect of presentations. And this can actually help to develop the student's confidence level with speaking, listening, and developing those digital skills. Granted, at age 16 right now, they may not be feeling that confident, but hopefully that will build up over time as they get used to it. There's practical tasks or role play tasks as well, can be very useful. Seeing how well they deal with those situations, and even assessing like their communication skills. If you're doing a role play, how good is their English competency? Because not just limited to written, but even verbal communication too. We also the use of case studies and scenarios can be quite supportive and developmental as well. And it's safer to review what someone else did wrong than what the students themselves often did wrong. They can be often easier to do that than rather than thinking about yourselves. And this could be useful as well to expose students to different contexts than their current learning experiences would be offering. And as well, by providing them with scenarios and examples outside their current work or industry experience too, they'll get a wider range, wider flavor of different examples. And again, that can also help when it comes to employer sets project and the occupational specialisms as well, because they're all sort of scenario based and context based. And the last group of bullet points, again, not going to talk much about this here, just different tools, formats, and so on in which could be used. So we've got Kahoot, Mentimeter, Slido, so on. Someone in the group said that also MS Forms, they've got Microsoft Forms. I've got Google Forms or Microsoft Forms or any of those other form methods, quite useful. Flipgrid, I love Flipgrid. That is a good little app, I must say, an app that you can download. If anyone isn't aware of that, that is really useful tool as well. I do enjoy that one. Right then, so that's a few different ways of methods, I suppose, of assessment. But what actual ideas can we come up with? And I'm going to give you a few suggestions after this as well. But let's get into not the how will it be delivered, the assessment, whether it's a presentation, whether it's with exam questions and so on. But is there any specific ideas you have, any strategies that you want to do? For example, is there any mini projects that you're thinking of doing with the students? You know, something that could maybe bring in different bits of their skills, a very holistic approach and so on. Any particular scenarios or contexts that you want to use with your students that you're thinking that might be useful? Or even is there any like quick formative assessment ideas, like when you're suddenly on the spot, maybe you have 10 minutes of a lesson left to use up. Quite unusual having extra time to use up, but there we have it. And you may want to just think of, oh, what's a quick little activity, a quick little formative thing you could do on this? Have you got any suggestions for those sort of on-the-spot ideas? And anything else along those lines. So again, I'm putting the link to the Jamboard directly into the chat. Hopefully you can access it just now. And what I'd like you to do is, I'll just bring it up here. Just add on some post-it notes. So if you go here to the sticky note, tap on this and then just share ideas. Then you can click save. And I'm just going to close off the sticky note. It automatically gets you another sticky note ready. But then there it is. And you can just click, drag wherever you want. So any different ideas you have, anything you want to do, can you add it in there? Yeah, I'm going to give 5 to 10 minutes on this. So certainly by 11, we'll be able to look at this. So 5 minutes at least. And remember, do pop any questions you have into the question box too. I will check them now as well. Okay, everyone. I'm going to have a look at these ideas here. So thank you. Also some specific sort of kind of assessment ideas we have here. So Wireshark. I've never heard of Wireshark. I hope you guys have. Actually, David, have you heard of Wireshark? If you're able to catch me or explain that one to me.
Yeah, it's just a networking tool, or we use it more on cybersecurity, and it might be used for just analysing coming in, that type of thing. So I presume who's put it in thinking more infrastructure side and looking at data packets and understanding what's going on.
Analysing that sort of stuff.
To analyse it. That's what I'm presuming anyway.
Yeah, no, I like that. That sounds good. So students have set up and configure their own workrooms. Very good. Year 13 students are going to actually present to year 12 students based on what they experienced during industry placement. Well, that's good, yeah. And that actually, even if you're not delivering like year 2 yet, if you don't have any year 13 students, if your year 12s are going to be out on placement during this first year, have them come back with some of their ideas, some of the things they found, and challenge their classmates to work out what it was. So some match cards, online quizzes, of course, Kahoot forms, crosswords. Yeah, little starter task. Absolutely, getting that terminology down is really, really useful. Following placement, a day in the life of. Very nice. Following placement, a day in the life of presentation. I like that. Absolutely. So all students play a game and use the data from the game as a basis for analysis. Oh, okay. The more complex the game, the more challenging the data. Interesting. I like that one. Second year students mentoring first year. Very good. And someone's doing some data work assessments. So extracting the Facebook data you have about you. Okay. I'm assuming then that would be to do some sort of analysis or so on that data. Yeah, absolutely. I did hear that there is a way that you can pop onto your Facebook profile and request all the data that's kind of got on you, and you get that instant report. Excellent. Thank you all for those suggestions. Again, very useful. Fantastic to share them. I'm just going to mention as well a simple sort of one. And the reason I'm mentioning this is it is really, really useful to prepare students as early as possible for some of these assessments. The reason I'm saying that, it's because the two most effective strategies for preparing students that have shown to actually improve students' achievement, which was a meta-analysis carried out by Dunlosky, were active recall. So that's the things like practice questions, which we're all coming up with, or even practice skills. And the second one, spaced repetition. They're the only two that were shown to significantly have a good impact on students' achievement. So spaced repetition, the idea of revisiting or asking questions on a topic after a period of time has passed. So maybe you delivered something in the autumn term, then you suddenly go back to it right at the start, maybe it was in September, then suddenly you're asking questions about it in November, December, or January. So a bit of spaced repetition, coming back to those little bits and seeing how much students can recall. So that can be very useful, getting them to answer questions from previously covered content periodically. But again, let's take some of the pressure off yourselves as teachers and so on. And instead of you having to spend time trying to divide these questions for active recall or anything like that, research has also shown that student-generated questions also has a positive impact on achievement. So again, students that produce their own questions actually has a good impact too. So a quick way of doing this, and again, to save you the onus of trying to write loads of questions as well, might be to give the students themselves, have them write the questions, a section of the specification. And you could even get them to make like AO1 style questions, so those recall knowledge style questions, assessment objective 1, AO2 style questions of applying knowledge, and AO3 style questions, the analyze and evaluate ones. And a quick way of doing this, especially for the recall ones, assessment objective 1, is to turn that bold statement into a question, and then the sub bullet points being the answer. So I got an example there with that, with list the different types of organizations. So a simple recall one, what are the different types of organizations, and they list them. And it certainly is more challenging, definitely, to come up with different scenarios or contexts and so on. But you would be surprised actually what some students will actually think of, what sort of scenarios, what contexts, what types of questions they'll come up with. Some of them can be quite challenging when they want to be, in terms of trying to trick out other students. So that is very, very useful too. And I've included another couple of examples there of where you could try and develop like AO2, AO3 style ones. So describe the similarities and differences between a public and private organization. So if they know about public organizations, they know about private, now they have to go in that a little bit deeper and compare them, so far spotting those similarities and differences. Or even the third option there, having to suggest what the best option is for what's being described, which is very much like the analyze and evaluate one. So for example, describing what requirements a business might want to actually have, having a look at those requirements, evaluating them, and then deciding, well, in that case, this business needs to be this type of organization. So I'm making that evaluation, deciding which organization type meets the criteria or requirements that are being described best. So just a few quick ideas just regarding that. And I'm now going to speak about the industry placement. That does form a big chunk, of course, of the T-level, 315 hours. But there is one thing I do need to say straight away, which is that the industry placement is completely separate to the technical qualification, and it does fall outside of NCFE's remit. So NCFE, what we have responsibility for is for the technical qualifications. The technical qualifications, so the teaching specification that you use, the assessments that students sit, that sort of thing. And no assessment is carried out in placement. So in terms of that delivery, the structuring, reporting, and so on, NCFE actually aren't involved in that. Having said that, though, we always want to support you guys. We want to support our providers wherever possible. So I'm going to provide just an overview of the placement, focusing on some of the common sort of questions that we actually get. Now, the information that I'm going to be given here is from the DFE's T-level placement page. So that first link that's on that page. And this contains the T-level guidance document, which is the one that I've used actually when putting this section together. And it does contain example templates and other things to support that too. The Association of Colleges, the AOC, they've also got various resources available to support you with that placement too. They're two quite useful links. And then, so just an overview. And as I've already said, they must complete 315 hours of industry placement. And it's whatever works best for you in terms of the scheduling of this. So 315 hours, that's about 45 days. You could have just a block placement, entire 45 days that students are on placement. Or You could even spread it out over the 2 years. So whether that's weekly placements they're doing, or you could even have a little, like I said, mix of both, maybe doing some little block placements, maybe 5 days they do straight away a week, and then they actually come back to do a week, then they're back into your regular lessons, then so far down the line they're back out again for a week, etc. And as well as that, it can occur outside of the academic year, such as summer holidays too. But before the students actually begin their placement, as well as you ensuring that they are work ready, they're all set, and you're happy that they're good to go out on placement, and knowing what's expected of them, all that sort of stuff, there does need to be a signed agreement between the student, the provider, and the employer. And again, an example of this agreement is available within the DFE guidance. They have templates and so on within there. The provider as well should also be setting learning goals for the students when they're on placement. And again, these learning goals will be agreed between provider, employer, and student too. Now, there are sample templates on the DFE's page showing the types of learning goals that you could set for your students, these objective templates. And one other suggestion could be to look at our specification, perhaps on the skills that are present, even in the occupational specialism. You could possibly use that to help set some goals for your students. So look at what skills are required that students need to be able to do, and then maybe even making a checklist for students if you wanted. Which of these skills did you observe, or were you actively taking part in? Things like that. Again, like I said, we won't be collecting any of this information. It's just useful to help you set those learning goals, and even for students to just keep track and think about what they've done on placement. The placement itself should be, of course, relevant to the T-level being done, so the digital T-level, and it should also be working in an environment that's actually external to the student's normal learning setting. As for the placement itself, it can be split over a maximum of 2 employers, and providers are expected to do a minimum of 3 review meetings with the student and employer. Doesn't need to be face-to-face. I mean, a lot of providers do like to get out if they can to see the students while they're actually on placement, but these may end up being phone calls and so on, depending on how available you are. So that's an overview of those aspects. And in terms of students actually being successful and completing the industry placement, well, there's 3 things they must do. And ultimately, really, it is providers who actually decide if students have passed their industry placement. So students will have successfully completed the industry placement if they can demonstrate that they've made sufficient progress towards their learning goals. So this is something that you, as the provider, is actually going to decide. And there are progress indicators, again, on the DFE guidance that you can use to see if you think they have actually made sufficient progress. So that's it then. Providing students have completed their 315 hours and worked for an external employer, then they've completed the industry placement. In terms of reporting this, as I mentioned, the NCFE, we're not involved with this. Nothing actually gets reported to us about the placements or data or any information like that from you. Instead, these are the ways that the industry placement is reported on. So the systems are the Managed T-Level Results Service. This should be completed by the 31st of July in year 2. So for inputting industry placement completion data. And then we have the individual learner records, the ILRs. And these are fields where students' hours would go into. Helps to secure your funding. And this field, again, completed by the 31st of July, just like the Managed T-Level Results Service. And the final thing then as well is for the school census. Also again by July 31st in year 2. I have included an additional link just at the bottom of the slide there about recording and reporting this sort of data. But as I mentioned, that DFE T-level guidance page, that'll be the best place in terms of placements. So even though we're not involved with placements, we are still interested in what you do and do want to offer support and so on. So just one final little thing, and then we're going to sort of close off with the resources and support we have available and address any questions you have, is what are your challenges or even successes? Are you having some successes with placements? So I'm going to put the link for this into the chat. So again, it's just a word cloud. If you can add on there any of the challenges that you may be finding, whether it's suitable employers, whether it's distance maybe that students might have to travel, whether it's not being able to, that the employer actually can't do the learning goals you'd like students to do, etc. Little bits like that. Or any success. Have you already secured your placement? Are your students already been out there? Is the employer getting really involved with placements as well and actually trying to upskill students or actually giving them their own sort of mini task? What's been going well with placements as well? So just share your thoughts on there. I'll give you a few minutes about this. And straight away we have some options coming in. I'll just give about a minute or so. And again, if there's any advice and so on that you have, do put it in there. We're just going to have a look here at the minute. I am very well aware of the fact that I've asked, what are your challenges and successes? Of course, if you're just starting for the very first time this coming September, you probably don't have any or many successes or challenges as of yet, if you're just learning about this. But we can certainly see that distance to an employer and student, oh, there we go. Student travel, distance to employer, that appears to be an issue that some people are finding. Finding suitable employers. Use students on days apprenticeships are in college. Okay. Employers offering remote placements. All right. I don't know if that is a success or a challenge. So excellent. Right. Thank you for sharing those ideas, for those comments. Hopefully, if those who are facing challenges with the placements, you may end up having some successes very soon. I think you managed to get it all sorted. If not, then we are happy to sort of try and help where we can. As I said, a lot of it is outside of our remit, but we certainly will try to offer help or advice and so on where possible. Another one here, employers not having office space for students on site. All right, so that might be the remote placement sort of aspect. Okay. I think it's certainly outside their normal learning environment if they're having to stay at home. And I know that for some of the hours, the 315 hours, up to 35 of those hours, I did have it on the slide, I didn't explicitly say it, but the 35 of those hours can be for taster activities as well. Right. Excellent, thank you for sharing those. And we've actually pretty much come to our last section now, which is regarding the resources and support that we have available to you with your delivery. So these are the resources that are actually available and in development from NCFE, and also what some other organizations are doing too. So our content team have actually developed and made available example schemes of work for the digital T-levels. And they've also developed teaching resources as well for the core content and the pathway content as well. And currently they are continuing to develop. Some resources have already been released for this. Some more in development for the occupational specialism content as well. How these resources are broken down is there are essentials resources, which are free, and then there's the additional resources, which are available at a cost. The essential ones, we basically ask providers, what's your challenges with delivery, or what's the difficult areas to teach, challenging areas, and so on. They told us, we made those resources for free, freely available. And all the resources, they do contain a e-learning resource, so an e-learning presentation. There's also activity sheets and or home study sheets, which are interactive PDFs, so students actually can complete it digitally rather than having to print off a physical copy. And session plans as well to accompany the e-learning resources. Aside from the resources that we have for your teaching, Hodder are producing a textbook as well for the core content of the digital T-level. And this is due to be released towards the end of August currently. So I've included the link to their website there, hoddereducation.co.uk, and /T-levels, where you'll be able to find that. In terms of events and webinars and support available, just like we have here, then the best place to go is to the T-level provider support page. All of our previous webinars are recorded. We do also have a YouTube playlist where you can view these. And I'm actually just going to show you that page. It's quite a useful page. So the T-level provider support page. So on here, it does give various different information. So if we went to parent and learner engagement resources, this could be useful for things like open evenings, let's say, even information leaflets about it. FAQs, fees, so if any students have resets and so on, you can check regarding cost of that. Our key date schedule, we do have the provisional dates on there for this coming academic year and as well, but I believe in July is when the dates are signed off and finalized. Our webinar schedule, like I mentioned. So all of this information on here. In terms of different contacts that's available for you, one of them is our customer support team. They're often the very first line of inquiry if you're having issues with your portal login, registering students, aspects like that. They're often the very first people you contact. We actually have set up as well a dedicated T-level support email address as well. As for myself, I am your contact for support related to teaching and learning and CPD and so on. One of the other things that the provider development team also offers are one-to-one consultations. So what you can do is, through your account exec, which I'll mention shortly, is you can actually book in a consultation with a member of the team, with myself, where we can actually have an hour session and talk through the T-level just one-to-one. You can bring up your specific delivery plan and so on, and we can discuss through options. And as I said, this is facilitated through your dedicated account execs. And these support centers and providers more so with the business of delivering T-levels, and that sort of more day-to-day one rather than the specifics of a qualification. So, and I will say, providers do having one of these four incredible people, that singular point of contact, incredibly valuable. I'm going to finish off now with the very same poll that I asked just at the beginning, and then we will have time, plenty of time, thankfully, for any questions and so on that comes up. So how are you feeling in terms of confidence now with the T-level when you're thinking about like the qualification and specification structure, how to lay out your delivery while we're bringing in the skills, embedding skills into content and so on? So if you just pop in where your current confidence level is now. And do be honest, please, if it's gone down, if you were in like 5 to 6 and now you're 1 to 2, do be honest about that, but please make sure you're asking the questions. We want to make sure you're supported. In the 5 to 6 range, so there's still a few percent in the 5 to 6 range, 67% in the 7 to 8 range, and then 17%, quite high. I didn't expect anyone really to be 9 to 10, quite high there. Right, thank you very much for those ideas. As I said, I would like to thank you all for coming to this today. And myself and David, we will remain on here for the remaining half hour that's left in case you do have any final questions or even initial questions. However, if you are leaving now, then we really do appreciate you coming. And there will be a short evaluation that does pop up at the end, just 5 multiple choice questions. And there is a sixth optional box where you can put in any extra comments. Is there other CPD you'd like, any support? So that sort of information into that free text box. So if you are leaving now, really appreciate you filling that in. And from everyone here then at NCFE, we would like to wish you a very enjoyable and successful year and make the most of the. I've had a question in just regarding the dates, the assessments. If we could just show exactly where to find them, of course. So in terms of the key dates for like exam papers and employer step projects and aspects like that, they are found on this page that I mentioned, the T-level provider support page. So along here on the bottom, we've got all these different aspects here. And the key date schedule is one of them. Sorry, I just realized I'm not sharing my screen, my apologies. So yeah, on the T-level provider support page, that's where you will find along the side here, the T-level key date schedule. So when we go onto here, we will be able to see the dates for the provisional dates anyways for the digital. So this is for the summer one. I'll look for the autumn series and for the summer series. So in the digital route, the autumn series, which if it is your first year, you may not be delivering. Although if it's your second year, then maybe you have resit students. For digital business services, in the autumn, it's from the 7th to the 18th currently provisionally for the digital business services. And the individual tasks are mentioned here in terms of which ones are fixed date assessments, which ones are within the window, how big that window is, and so on. And core papers, looks like 6th and 13th of December, both morning. Now, if we're looking at digital support, we also have the same assessment window. We got the tasks on here. Core papers, 7th and 14th of December at 9 a.m. I imagine most of you might end up doing the summer series. So we do have our core summer 2023 series here. So again, if you're doing digital business, that period is currently down as 8th of May to 19th of May. Exam papers, 13th of June and 20th of June, 13th and 20th of June. That's for digital business services. Here we have digital support services. And again, same 8th of May to 19th of May. And for the exam papers, 14th of June in the morning and 21st of June in the morning. And again, if we go further, when it got into occupational specialism, so if you have students who are in year 2, for example, that information is given here. So data technician and digital business, task 1, fixed date and time, starting on the 24th of April. And you will find that a lot of them are scheduled for April time. And whether it's mid-April, more towards the start, middle or end, can vary ever so slightly, but they're usually mid-April-ish when they begin. So here we have 17th of April when we're looking at network cabling and so on. I hope that helps. I hope that's answered the question you had. Just going to check if there's any other questions. No more questions at the minute. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. One has just come in saying they need a login to access the resources. Oh, you do indeed, yes. One of the things that's needed to download the teaching resources, I'll just go to digital support services since that seems to be the main one that people are doing. I'll just show you on here again. So when we go into our teaching resources, oops, put a bit back a bit too far. So on the quali page, as I was just mentioning, so looking at digital support services on here, we have got, like I mentioned, the qualification specification, sample assessment materials, and so on. In this tab, the assessment materials tab, this is where the assessments that have just been sat in the summer, they will end up sitting in here. Teaching materials. And this is where you would need a portal login. So we have our essentials resources, which are free, the additional ones which come at a cost, and our other resources down here for root core element 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then some of the pathway stuff. So there's some resources there, free ones for parts of those content. Now, when it comes onto this, you do need a portal login. So does it ask you to log in before you can download it? It is free. Well, if it says free, it's free. Then the portal login will allow you to download. Usually your exams officer can create that for you. If not, you can actually contact or give our customer support team a call. Or in QualHub, if you went to login up here and went to portal, you can see there is an option to register here. If you do the register bit, just make sure you put in your center number correctly. That's so you can tie your login to the correct center. So if you don't have a portal login, that's the quickest way to go about getting it. Or there's a few options to go about doing it. Probably the quickest is go straight to your exams officer or someone in your exams team. Is very often the person who has to log in. So if you think about whoever is responsible for registering your students, booking the assessments and so on, whoever does those sort of actual details, they're probably the person. Now, there hasn't been any further questions that have come in. I can see more people have gradually left. So I'm going to end today's session. Please make sure you have already grabbed the handouts from the handout section, the slides that have been used today. That will have our contact information on it, email address and so on. So please do get in touch should you have any queries, anything you want to check. And from everyone here, as I said, from everyone here at NCFE, please do. I hope it is a very successful year on results day for you and that you manage to have a very enjoyable and well-earned rest over the summer. Thank you.